Welcome to the second episode of the Life, Money, and Football podcast, a podcast built to improve all aspects of a professional football player's life. In this episode, I sat down with Eric Dungy, real estate advisor in the sports and entertainment division at Compass and the official luxury realtor of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Eric played wide receiver at both Oregon and the University of South Florida. And like so many others, he found himself at the end of his college football career trying to figure out, what do I do in life after football? Eric could have easily followed in his father's footsteps and went into coaching. Of course, his father being Tony Dungy, Super Bowl winning head coach with the Indianapolis Colts. But instead, he decided to forge his own path into real estate. In the episode, Eric discusses how to handle success and failure, both in football and in life, and the lessons he learned from them. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Eric. All right, Eric, thanks for joining us today. Today we got Eric Dungy, real estate advisor with Compass in Tampa and the official luxury realtor of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Don't forget that part. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today, man.
What's up, Dustin? Yeah, of course, man. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to join, and I look forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, this is, I think it'll be a great episode. I think a lot of people will be really interested to hear your story and a little background about how we know each other. Pretty funny. My wife and Eric actually went to summer camp as kids together way back when, I think in South Carolina, if I'm correct.
Yeah, man. Crazy small world that two Floridians met in summer camp in South Carolina in like 2002 maybe.
Yeah.
Probably, going on 20 years ago. And then, with social media, being able to stay in touch. And then obviously, you came in the fold and here we are.
Yeah, it's a crazy story. And then just so happened also a bunch of my best friends were the same high school, Plant High School in Tampa. So it's a small world. 6 degrees of separation really does exist, I guess you'd say. So that's how we know each other. But I want to get into kind of your journey. The idea is let's hear the story of Eric's life, starting out, growing up in Tampa for the most part, I guess. As a coach's son, obviously a high-profile coach, but talk about what that was like for you growing up.
Yeah, I had a really special childhood, and looking back, I can even really look back and just kind of think back at how cool it was. But from as long as I remember, my dad was a coach. Even when we lived in Minnesota, he was the defensive coordinator for the Vikings. But as far back as I remember, I was going to the facility and playing around, watching film on his TV and watching practice and running around the locker room. I felt like I had 50 big brothers because all the players on the team were like my big brothers. And I would go to training camp with him every summer and stay in the dorm with him and go to all the away games and go on the team plane. And basically anytime I didn't have school, I would be with him. So whether that was during that Christmas time or spring break or the summer or just a random day off, for Columbus Day or whatever day it was, I was always just around, and it was really awesome just to be around and be in the mix and just be like a fly on the wall. He let me sit in on draft day in the war room, and so I would be in there with when the guys were getting called right when they got drafted. It was the things I got to do, they were just normal because it was just everyday life. But looking back, it was crazy, going to the Super Bowl and being in the tunnel, with the players right before the game started and just what? Just some crazy experiences. So yeah, it was a blessing. But I will say one of the coolest things was of all that stuff that I got to do, my dad took me to school every day, drove me to school. And so that means that, you hear these stories about coaches going to be in the office at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., or whatever crazy story. Obviously, I was not getting dropped off to school that early. So my dad was just dropping me off at school at 7 o'clock, whatever time, normal time, and then going to work. So we always had that time together. And he kind of just showed me the priority that yes, you have to work hard at what you're doing, but it's not your whole life. And he prioritized that family life and just kind of showing me what was important. So it was an amazing childhood.
Yeah, that is amazing because you hear the other side of the coin, right? The sacrifices that the coaches make. I did hear an interview where Aaron Donald on I Am Athlete talked about every chance he gets, he tries to pick up or drop off his kids at school. So I think that's great that your dad started that then, and I think it's sort of coming back as more players and coaches realize the priority of it. But it's awesome that you had that opportunity and got to do obviously all the other things along with it. During that time, I mean, obviously maybe you developed a love for football immediately, but was there a time where you're like, hey, I want to do this, I want to play? Like, do you remember when that was or when that came about for you?
Yeah, pretty much always. I just always had a love for the game. I was like, the kid that was playing imaginary football against myself in the hallways and doing, just all types of stuff. But ironically, I was not good at football when I first started. My first time competitively playing was in third grade, TBYFL Dolphins, North Tampa Dolphins. I was soft. I didn't like contact, and I didn't even have cleats. I was out there in tennis shoes, like how there's like the one kid that doesn't have cleats. Somehow that was me, and so I didn't make it too long. I think I quit the team in the middle of the year.
Oh
so
my gosh!
Football career wasn't off to a solid start. But even then, even when I stopped playing, I was still playing flag football and still playing in recess and playing in the street and stuff like that. But my competitive organized football career didn't get off to the greatest start, and our coaches, God bless them, they were very intense at that age. They were thinking every game was the Super Bowl, and it's little kid, third grade football. But so that was my start for football. But I got better as I got older.
Yeah. So when did that change for you? What was it? Just, hey, I grew up? Was it I had to work hard? When did that change for you?
Yeah, I think kind of ironically, the change was when I moved to Indiana when I was in my 7th grade year. I don't know, part of it just when you're in 6th grade and you're playing against 8th graders, that's a big difference. And then you start to catch up a little bit, 7th grade. And then also I think at that point too, I realized where my advantages could be, but in the mental side of the game. I was decently tall and decently athletic, but I wasn't necessarily super fast. And there was a lot of kids that were more bulkier than me and bigger than me. I was really skinny at that age, but I was really good at especially on defense of just the mental side of the game. And especially for your 7th grade quarterback's not looking the defense off or going to his second and third read. So yeah. I got a lot of interceptions from jumping routes as a middle schooler and stuff like that. So I kind of figured out where I could do well, and it wasn't necessarily the physical side of it until I kind of got caught up and got bigger and stronger.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've been watching film your whole life, so I mean, you should.
Those hours of film study finally paid off, and I was 12 years old. I guess I finally started paying dividends for me.
Yeah, it should eventually, I guess. So that's interesting, right? Because I think you think that guys who played high level college football, they were great from the beginning, but that's not the case. I mean, some guys don't even pick it up until later in life. Even you maybe come from a football background, it took you a while to catch up potentially to some others, but.
Yeah, I was kind of a later bloomer athletically. Love the game and always I had pretty good skill. I could catch the ball and knew how to run good routes and things like that. But just there was just a lot of kids that were faster than me and a lot of kids that were bigger than me and stuff like that. And so I didn't let that get discouraged. But I was kind of a late bloomer and kind of a late recruit and things like that. I wasn't a big 5-star or anything like that. But yeah, I think I tell my younger brother now, who is a junior in high school and going and has end of his junior year right now and then going to his senior year, and he's kind of discouraged because he doesn't have 25 million offers yet, and some of the kids are, but it's not everybody's going to peak at the same time, and you gotta just kind of run your own race and not really compare yourself to other kids, which is harder now because you can be a middle schooler and compare yourself against the other middle school kid in California who's the best middle schooler player at your position in the whole country, and you can watch his huddle tape and all that stuff, and so it's a lot of exposure, which can sometimes not be the best thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can compare yourself to anybody these days at any age almost, it seems like. So let's take it back to. So you were a late bloomer, as you said. When did that time come, and what was the college recruiting process like for you? Yeah,
so I got my first offer as a junior, so it wasn't I was getting 0 offers, 0 interest. But at the same time, I played at a really competitive school, playing high school, like you mentioned. So we had a few big time players, Aaron Murray and Orson Charles being 2 of them that were multiple offers. SEC, both went to Georgia, and so compared to those guys, I was a later bloomer, later developer. But yeah, for me, it was a slow kind of process. I ended up going to the University of Oregon, and I wasn't on their radar until the very end of my senior year. my dream school was Florida State. And so like the entire time in high school, I was kind of like holding out for Florida State to offer me. And I kind of was like, even if other schools were showing interest, I was kind of, taking it on, but like not, I was kind of like, yeah, like whatever. But like when Florida State offers me, that's when I'll really, like I'm going with the flow, but I'm like really holding out for the Seminoles, right? And they start to kind of show up a little bit towards the end of my senior year. So I'm like, all right, there we go. Like Florida State's, finally, here we go. Perfect timing, right? And Oregon didn't really recruit me until after the season was over. It happened in like 3 weeks. It was crazy. Wow. I remember this to this day. I was in Indy visiting some friends like around New Year's time. We were watching the Hangover 1, original Hangover. And I got a call from the 541 number, which is Chip Kelly's number. And I think I picked it up and was like, hey, I'm like about to go to a movie. Can I call you back? And it was like, hey, this is Chip Kelly. Like, maybe you want to wait a couple minutes? And I was like, yes, I do have time for you. Yes, actually. So he we chopped it up real quick. And then Scott Frost, who was the recently Nebraska's head coach, he was the Oregon receiver coach at the time. He came to Tampa to visit me like maybe the next week. And then I went to Oregon for a visit the week after that. They offered me like in person, and I said, took it, basically on the spot. Yeah. And it all happened in 3 weeks. So it's like some certain schools have been like, recruiting me for like a year maybe or more, and like kind of calling me every week and checking in with me. But then Oregon kind of just happened really quickly. But so that's crazy.
Yeah. So like, what was it that made you decide like, okay, this is where I'm going so quickly relative?
Yeah. A lot of people give me a hard time. They're always like, oh, you went over there for the uniforms or blah, blah, blah. It's like, just that didn't really have anything to do with it. For me, there was a few things that like really mattered. Like I was a big student in the game at that point. I still am, but at that point I really was. And their offense at the time was unlike anybody else's offense in football. So like just the idea to like learn that and be in that culture like was super fascinating for me. And then Scott Frost, the receiver coach, like when you're a college football player, obviously your head coach is important, but your position coach is the guy that you're going to spend the majority of your time with. You're be meeting with him multiple times a day, every day for 4 to 5 years. So like it's imperative to have a good, good relationship with that person. And I just really hit off with him. And what was crazy is indirectly, so Coach Frost played defense in the NFL for a couple of years and played for the Bucs for a few years. And Mike Tomlin was his position coach. And although my dad never coached Scott Frost, because my dad coached Mike Tomlin and Mike Tomlin coached Coach Frost, there was this weird deal where it was like almost like Coach Frost was like a younger white version of my dad. But no, like just like he just had a lot of the same principles like on the field and off the field. So I felt very comfortable like knowing that he was going to be the guy that was going to be kind of looking after me and teaching me the game, for 4+ years. Yeah. So him plus the offense, it was just like that was the main reason why I wanted to go out there. And I was also really open to seeing something new as far as like I lived in Indiana, I lived in Kansas, that's where I was born. Lived in Minnesota, lived in Florida for most of my life. So I was open to like seeing the West Coast. A lot of people in Florida or in Tampa, especially, they either go to University of Florida or Florida State, one of the Florida schools. And so I didn't necessarily, although Florida State was a dream school, I was open to like a new experience and not just doing what everybody else did and not going into like, just that same experience I had in high school and college. So I was open to like seeing something new. So all that came together and it worked out.
Yeah, I mean, it can't get much more different than going all the way out to Portland, Oregon. For those people, especially Tampa, Florida, is a very different experience. So you get out there, and well, I guess let me step back. Imagine you were in the same position today with what is probably a very different landscape from a recruiting standpoint, with both NIL for one, but like you said, you didn't even get recruited and decide to go to Oregon until after the season. Well, now we've got signing periods. Like we got a month or so away from the first signing period. Now you got the transfer portal that affects all of the new high school players coming into college. Like talk about what you would feel like in today's recruiting world versus what you experienced then. Like, what's your viewpoint on what it's like today?
Yeah. I mean, the game is way different. Like, just going back to the timing of it, like, I think the early signing period now is like in December, first week of December. I don't know exactly. I committed to work in probably like mid to late January.
Yeah.
They didn't offer me until mid-January. And I like the reason why is I didn't play good until that, like my best like 5-6 games of my high school career with the playoffs and like the last couple of regular season games. So like if the signing period was in December, I wouldn't even been a recruiter, you know, it would have been too late.
Yeah.
So like that's just that. The timing of it is different. And part of it, like back then, there's Facebook was around, Twitter was like barely getting going, Instagram didn't exist, and like especially on my team, like I mentioned, Aaron and Orson, we had some big players. Like the culture of like recruiting was different. Like it was more so like you didn't really talk about your offers. It was more so like, hey man, we're just all trying to be team players, and it was like taboo to speak about your recruiting really. And so like, but now it's the opposite where you're trying to like market yourself, you're trying to like promote yourself. And you know, for a while I looked down on that. I was like, man, these young kids, man, they don't get it, blah blah blah. But it's like they can make money now. So like, who am I to say like you shouldn't be promoting yourself and you shouldn't be trying to like get exposure, you know, starting from high school. So like, just the mindsets were way different. We're like, and then even when I transferred to USF for my 5th year of college, the transfer portal was I think still 1 year away from existing, and it was still a similar thing where like I didn't really want to rock the boat at Oregon. I didn't really want people to know I was leaving. So I reached out to USF on my own and kind of coordinated it kind of just behind the scenes. I went, they're in Tampa, so I went back during spring break and visited and was like, all right, cool, let's do it. But like in hindsight, like maybe I would have done the transfer portal and maybe I would have had more than one option. Who knows? Like the butterfly effect that would take me. Maybe I would have gone just making this up. Rutgers, right? And then now all of a sudden I live in New Jersey, and then where's my life take me then? You know what I mean? So like, just the game has definitely changed a lot. Not necessarily good or bad, but it's just kind of different from when I was, coming up just like 10 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, the transfer portal has so many ripple effects, right? Today that NIL is one thing, but I think, more important sometimes for what a senior is going to have to deal with is who's deciding to transfer that plays the same position as you that you weren't thinking you were going to compete with, that now all of a sudden you have to compete with. And then how does that affect the decision you make now or in a year from now when you go through spring practice and you've got the time between spring and fall practice, say you report early, right? Now you might even have another decision to make. So there's just so many decision opportunities, I guess, for these kids. And I know from talking to some others, Coach Wiener at the time had a very strict policy, right? Like once you commit, you're committed, you're going to go. So like that policy is very, today, who knows how that would go over with most of these kids, right? So that probably was interesting for you too, because you had a very, your coach at the time had a very specific approach to recruiting as well.
Absolutely, yeah. The code has kind of changed, and like you mentioned with Coach Wiener, it was very much like your word was serious, and the word commitment really meant that. And so you didn't want to lead schools on, and you didn't want to say that I commit until you really meant it. And unless there was a big circumstance change, like maybe a coaching change or something like that, he really didn't want you to go back on your word. Versus now, I think it's, you see guys recommit, decommit, recommit, reopen the commitment back up, with all that stuff, and like more power to them. But just this landscape has just changed. But I will say, I do think, I do appreciate that the players have more agency now. They have more, it's a two-way street in terms of like for all the times that where college coaches could leave, for a better job at the end of the year and things like that. Players have that same ability to move. I know for fans, it's probably hard to watch, and as far as like the continuity, and there probably is something to be said for like not being able to compete and like not be able to stick things out. But for every example of somebody sticking it out, you can also look at somebody who like transferred and it worked out better for them. So, I don't think we should be too hard on like, young kids for just trying to like play football and try to have fun and things like that. But yeah, it's just a crazy how the game has changed and how, just in a few years, college football is kind of getting closer to professional football. And I think like to your point, I think it's almost like every year it's kind of like a new recruiting season where, all right, am I going to stay? Am I transferring? Who's coming in? Who's coming out? Is my coach leaving? Are we getting 4 new guys in my position? Are all the seniors going to leave? Are we getting graduate transfers? Like it's the landscape can change from year to year very dramatically.
Yeah. And so that leads me to an interesting question. Like, with your father and his role, what was his involvement in your recruiting process? And do you feel like he had a lot of value because he was involved, or was he not involved? And so it was all on you from your own decision.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Like when it came to my football career, my dad really just took the role of like being like a parent. And so like he would like have an involvement that like everybody else, like a standard level of like parental involvement. So like going back before even getting into recruiting, just playing football, like he would go to the games and just sit on the top of the top row of the bleachers like the other dads and like watch. He didn't come down and like, hey, I got an idea, let me draw a play up or anything like that. And then like, like for us, a plant, like during the weeknights after practice, we'd have parents would volunteer and they'd cook food after dinner, after practice. They'd be, burgers or hot dogs or whatever. And he'd be in the line cooking burgers and passing out plates just like the rec. So like his involvement was just like standard, parental involvement. So like, he went to my visit to Oregon with me. He, kind of gave me his pros and cons, kind of like what I think everybody else's dad would do. And that was that. And same thing as far as just helping me kind of like navigate it. I would say, this is what I like about this school, what I don't like. But he didn't really overstep, or he didn't like say like, hey, I'm going to go talk to this coach and tell him, what I think, or like anything like that. So yeah, it was just really helpful, like, to have like a very just like, I would say just like a natural recruiting process where it felt, felt like just normal, I guess.
Yeah. And it was your decision, right? And it was like you ultimately, he wasn't trying to influence you in any one way or the other. And the fact is, like you said, the great part is he was there and supporting you. There's plenty of other kids back then, but certainly as we talked about the complications today, like you're trying to make the decision on your own without any parents' involvement, and even the baseline. Like all of those things can be very some heavy weights for these young kids to have to decide whether you're 18 or 21. I mean, it's a lot of decisions you have to make. So, I think it's good to have a balance of involvement, but if you don't have that involvement, I think the story is try to find somebody you can lean on to help you make that decision, right?
Yeah, I would just say to that point, like obviously, like with my situation, there wasn't like any kind of, I wasn't any expectation for me to have to provide for my family or anything like that. So I would just say like if a young athlete's not in that position, like you said, to find that person who's going to be unbiased and have your best interest. I'm obviously not having to worry about my dad trying to send me to Oregon so he can get a kickback or something under the table. Like, that's not the case with me. So I was fortunate that wasn't the situation. My mom was a little sad that I was going far away, but like other than that, it was very unbiased. Like I could go wherever I wanted to go. But like you hear a lot of stories about kids where it's like, oh well, I wanted to go here, but my dad was going to get paid by the coaches. And now with NIL, it's about just well, here's the biggest sponsorship opportunity, which obviously that's important, but like maybe at the detriment of like your professional development or your athletic development. So just having that advisor who just really has your best interest, whether that's your parent, your pastor, your high school coach, whoever it is, just finding that person is really important.
Yeah, agreed. So you get to Oregon. What was your time like, your experience like while you were there? What do you think your biggest lessons were? Those types of things.
Man, yeah, Oregon was awesome. Like we both kind of mentioned, it was very different, especially like thinking back to like 2010, like Florida like wasn't quite like on its like hip liberal progressive wave as Oregon was. So like when I got there, like I had never seen a recycling bin or I had never seen like, people protesting in the streets for like whatever social causes, and I didn't see like there's a lot of interesting things you see in Oregon. Like you see naked bike riders protesting, like whatever things going on, and like there's all types of stuff. Some things I can't even mention probably on the podcast, but just so like culturally, like nothing bad, but just like just like, oh man, this is different, So that was the first part of it, but man, it was a great time. Like we had probably the most successful like 4-year run in the school history, really, and we really it was fast, hard to finish, and win the day was like the motto. And what I really just learned about from that was just like every day, control what you can control and try to win that one day and not get too ahead of yourself. And that was our motto that they kind of preached. And it was really amazing to see that kind of play out. There was a point where I thought we would never lose a game because we had this whole deal where it was like, we're going to work hard and we're going to be the most conditioned team and we're going to, wear them out in the fourth quarter. And then my freshman year, every single game, a lot of times we would start out losing, but we'd pull away in the second half and we'd win and we'd score like 50 points a game. And I was like, oh, we're just going to work hard and just we had this whole, like, the way our training regimen where, like, we have sports science and all this stuff. And I was like, we're never going to lose. We're just going to win 4 national championships. It would be amazing. And then we went into Cam Newton in Auburn, and then he got a reality check. But no, it was a great time. I have, lifelong friends to this day. And, just like I said, national championship game, Rose Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, Alamo Bowl. I had to play with a Heisman Trophy winner. Got to play with some amazing players, first-round draft picks. Like, this was an amazing experience, to play on College game day, to play on ESPN, like, regularly where you're not even thinking about it. It's all that stuff. Just couldn't really ask for a better 4 years, for college experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, it's hard. And also coming from Plant, like, and what you all did there, too. I mean, just, you won a lot. Let's say that.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah, that was a blessing too. Like, the Plant, we were the Florida state champions my junior and senior year, and then we went to the national championship game my freshman year. And I thought we were gonna win up until we didn't. But, like, definitely just part of this, like, culture of just, like, being around winning teams. And it's interesting, like, Chip Kelly and Robert Wiener are very different, but at the same time, like, they had some similarities and some crossovers. But it was just really cool to see how they both kind of developed their cultures and to be part of that. Just really special. Yeah.
So you thought you were going to win every time. You didn't. So, like, talk about what that experience was like, not only for you as, like, part of the team, but you personally and your growth of where you thought you might be, at the end of the 4 years.
Yeah. Personally, like, I'll say this, and I've never really said this, but, like, I'm disappointed in my college career as an individual. Like, I had huge aspirations involved with football, and, like, I played in college and played well, or played all right, but, like, I didn't, like, I don't know how to say it. Like, I didn't hit all the goals I wanted to hit. I didn't make it to the NFL. Some were injury related, some were just me not living up to my own standards, not, leaving some plays on the field, things like that. So from, like, an individual standpoint, like, I honestly can say I'm a little disappointed. Like, I'm at peace with it now, but, like, looking back, like, I definitely look back like, man, like, there should have been more for you. But at the same time, from a team perspective, like, I played on some amazing teams, and we did a lot of great stuff as a team. And, like, the players that did play, like, ahead of me at times are my friends and guys that were very good players. So it's not like I have no regrets. I'm not claiming politics. I'm not claiming anything like that. It's just one of those things where I'm like, man, I wish I could have done more. But at the same time, like, everything happens for a reason. And so, like, I know that I'm, like, here, now where I'm supposed to be. And it took me a little while to kind of, make peace with that. But, eventually I did, and I'm happy with that. But yeah, it's just up and down career. Now, my freshman year, I scored a touchdown, and, like, my redshirt freshman year, I scored a touchdown, like, my second game. So in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna score like 25 touchdowns probably over the next couple of years, and I was the only one I ever scored. So, like, like, just things like that. Like, it's, just it was great, and I played in the Rose Bowl, and I scored a touchdown in college, and started a few games in college. Like, did a lot of amazing things, but, like, I'll be lying if I said that I, like, checked off everything on my my to-do list.
Yeah. So thinking back to then, like, if you could have told yourself, or given yourself some advice, what would you have given yourself?
Ooh, good question. I think one thing maybe would have been to, as weird as it sounds, maybe not take things so serious. I was very, very serious about football, and just, like, I just took myself very serious at that age. And like, part of that's, like, delayed gratification and, like, deferring certain things to, as far as, like, saying no to partying and things like that and whatever. But then at the same time, just, like, maybe if I had loosened up and maybe just like not been so tight, maybe I would have been more relaxed and had more, and maybe been able to perform a little bit better. That's a good question though. But yeah, I would say that's probably one of it. I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because not everyone, but because you were late recruited, but anytime you're going to a huge university, like one of the best football programs in the country, right? You had to feel pretty awesome about yourself and going like with, your chest out, like, okay, I'm at Oregon. They wanted me here. I'm going to do amazing things. Right. And then you get into it and you realize, wow, like 90 other guys think the same thing. And it's like, it's just, I can only imagine that the mindset at some point in time you get humbled, right? Yeah. And I think probably it's interesting your take of, hey, maybe I should have been looser. Probably the majority of the people say I should have taken it more seriously. So I think that's a different perspective than I think most would say as to maybe why they didn't do as well as they would have thought they did.
Yeah, and I think kind of firstly, I think a lot of people probably, if you ask every athlete, the majority of them probably would have said that maybe they didn't take it serious or didn't go hard enough. And I honestly can say, like, I really went hard, took things serious, didn't have too much fun, like really was focused and everything. But also, I think to your point, though, just like the irrational confidence it takes to be a high-level athlete. I mean, like looking back, I also want to give myself a little bit of like self-compassion. Like I was a 2-star recruit. I went to Oregon. I was the lowest rated player in my class. So even though I didn't meet all my goals and expectations, I also did like outperform the odds to a certain extent, and just making it to Oregon. And then I never really had that like the humble moment necessarily. Like I kind of came into college, like I said, I was under a smaller recruit. So I was kind of like, man, I got to outwork everybody on this recruiting class. I got to outwork people. And so I didn't have that cocky mindset at the same time. But for me, the disappointing part, the challenging part was like towards the end when deep down I kind of knew I wasn't going to make it, like as far as to the NFL, even though I still had some time left to play. But then you're trying to like deny that, and you're like, no, don't believe that. Like you're having this conversation with yourself, like, nah, that's crazy. You can still make it. You need more of a chance. You just need some more playing time. But like deep down, you're like, man. I remember like watching Alabama, and I'm like, man, Amari Cooper's 2 years younger than me. And he's way better than me. Like, I'm probably not gonna. But like, they'd be like, nah, he just because we're playing, just like going back and forth, and like just having those moments where you kind of realize, like, man, I might not go to the NFL Hall of Fame. I might not be a first round pick. I might not be any pick. Like just having those battles with yourself. And that was a challenging part for me. Was like kind of accepting that. That did lead me to transfer, and that was a really hard decision too. I love my team and my teammates, and I knew that we like had a chance to go back to the championship game, and they did the next year. Like I knew the roster was that good, but I just like ever since I was a little kid, I just dreamt of playing in the NFL, and I just felt like where I was at Oregon at that time, even if our team did well, I wasn't going to be able to do what it took to get noticed by the NFL scouts. And so that was like what led me to make that decision. And it was like a really hard decision. Like I remember like crying like after my last day in Oregon, like after saying goodbye to like my closest friends and like driving home and just being like, man, I'm really doing this. But like when I went to USF my last year, my goal was like to show, hopefully to put some more stuff on film and to get more opportunities. And between, again, some poor play and some injuries, didn't do a whole lot more than I did at Oregon, to be honest. But like, I was like, man, it's over, bro. Like, it's over, man. Like had I been at Oregon, I could always make that excuse of, they didn't give me a chance, or I had, this guy was ahead of me or whatever. But like, I was like, hey man, you left Oregon, you went somewhere else and got the same results. Like you gotta man up and look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself like, hey man, you weren't enough. Like you don't have what it takes. And so that was difficult, but like it was, I'm glad that my end of my football career was very like black and white. It would have been harder if I would have done pretty well and maybe got like a combine invite or been like a late round, whatever. Like it was that would have been harder to let go of, but like it was pretty much the game was like, Eric, you're done.
Yeah.
You got to stop, man.
Yeah, I think that's another interesting perspective, you know, is like it was made very clear to you and that was helpful for you. Again, I you know, from the conversations that I've had in these episodes, it's like so much of this experience in college football is mental. Way more than people talk about. Now it's being talked about more, right? More from the mental health angle, but just in general, like the decisions you have to make as an 18 to 22-year-old daily, whether it's in practice or with school or about where do you play, what's the best opportunity for you, is a lot. I mean, a student athlete has so much on their plate. And I think that your story kind of talks to that. One question I additionally want to ask you is like, now imagine you're playing today and NIL is a part of it. And you're thinking about how I can make money. Like your schedule was packed. Like you said, you took it seriously. You worked your butt off every day. Do you feel like you would have even had time for NIL activity? Like how would that have fit into your schedule?
Yeah, so two things on that. You kind of jogged my memory when you talked about advice to my younger self, man.
Yeah.
And like, and when you mentioned the mental health, that would have been like my biggest thing. I honestly was in probably pretty poor mental health in college. It started just from like, you know, just the pressure you put on yourself. I was a small, undersized person, so like trying to gain weight, trying to eat, can't eat, trying to force myself to eat, that whole mental battle. And then, you know, just, you know, relationships, you know, just the normal stuff that, you know, guys and girls in college, like that aspect. And just, I would have, and, you know, just you're 18 living in a random city across the country, like, and not really know who you can talk to and keeping things internalized. So would have definitely like had a therapist and just been more open about my struggles and speaking to people and getting help from the mental aspect. So that's something I would have definitely told my younger self if I'm looking back to do, and hope that the kids now are doing. And then to add to that, like you said, like the NIL, like one thing that you like really did, or at least I really did, is like every decision I made was based around like having like, how can this like give me more time for football? So like classes, like you pick the easiest class you can, that way you have more time to work out and more time to watch film or whatever, right? And so like you do all of that, but then you're like, oh man, like I also got to go to this photo shoot, or I got to go down to the car dealership and go, you know, film these Instagram reels or whatever. And then like add to the mental health conversation of like, oh, my contract stipulates that like I'm only getting paid if I play and I'm not playing or whatever. Like, man, that's a lot for an 18-year-old or 21-year-old or whatever the case may be.
Right. Yeah, I think we have to realize that, like, one, I think we probably both agree that it is a good thing for college athletes, you know, right? To be able to profit off of your success and your personal brand. Any free person in America should be able to do that, right? But I think we also have to understand, like, there's already a lot of pressure, already a lot of weight on kids, and we're adding more of that to them, whether that's the pressure they put on themselves or the external pressures that come along with it, that I think we have to all be cognizant of and really think it is a great thing, but how do we help them in as many ways possible where this great thing doesn't ruin so many kids that we look back and revert to not allowing it at some point in time, or ending up in an environment that none of us want, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the biggest thing, is like remembering that the main thing is like the well-being of the kids, and like making sure that that's prioritized. You know, it's great that the coaches are making $10 million. It's great that the kids are making a couple $100K or even, you know, more than that in some cases. But like, let's not forget that like the whole point of like college in general is just for like the well-being and like the advancement of like young men and women. So like, let's not forget that.
Yeah. Like they're still there. It is still student athlete today, student first, athlete second. You know, in football, it may really be the other way around. But there's still a piece of it that's student, because, I mean, part of the reason we're doing this podcast and telling your story is because you are more like most college athletes, as in you don't make it to the pro league, whether it's the NFL, NBA, NHL, so on and so forth. Like, that is the majority of college athletes. There isn't a professional opportunity after college. So the student piece is really important, and something that you need to focus on. But also, if you're thinking about building a personal brand, some of what you can learn in college does help you build your personal brand better. So like, you got to also think about, like, if your if NIL is your thing, and you're like, look, maybe you're a young Eric and you realize earlier, like, I'm not going to make it to the league, so let me create this brand that gives me some of the same things I would get from being in the league now, and use football to help me build that. Well, school, in some ways, if you're smart about the classes you take, the environments you put yourself in, right, can also build that for you.
Absolutely. I was a sociology major, and like, great profession, great, major and all that. But like, in hindsight, I probably would have been a business major. Not to say that I was smart enough to get into business school, but like, I would have tried to if I would have, but when you have this, it's hard, because to be a top level athlete, you have to have a rational confidence, and you have to think that you're going to beat the odds, and even know that, you were a small recruit, you're going to make it to the league, and you're going to, whatever, all this stuff. But like, at the same time, had I kind of had that, if I'd known where I was going to be here, where I'm at now, I probably would have taken some marketing and some business classes, and, and maybe some finance and things like that. And that would have helped me, with NIL deals, with just what I'm doing now, is in real estate, just as in the real world. But, my priorities weren't on that at the time. My priorities were just on like, how can I get A's easily so I can not have to go to study hall and not have to spend extra time in school. And so, stuff. Again, it goes back to, there's so many decisions to make then, more now, and there's still not any more help today for these kids. So I hope, through these discussions, yours included, that we're providing some piece of advice to the other guys who are going through this right now with some more decisions than you maybe had to make. So I think I think your perspective, different from others, is really helpful. But you get to your end of your USF career, right? And you're like, okay, so the door was slammed for me, and now I've got to figure out what is next. So what was that like for you? That was tough. That was scary. I think every athlete, like, that's a fear you face, like whether it's high school and you're not going to go to college, or it's college and you're not going pro, or you made it pro and that you're getting older or whatever. Like, at a certain point, you're kind of looking at that reality, and it's scary. Like, I didn't really have one thing I was super interested in. Like I said, I had a major that I got good grades in, but I wasn't super passionate about necessarily. And so I'm like, man, I don't really know what I want to do. And so I remember, like, I was back in Oregon. I was visiting some friends. I'm staying on my friend's futon. They're getting ready to play the Rose Bowl, and I'm like, I have nothing to do. I have no money, and no plans, no responsibilities, no nothing. I'm just like, this is crazy. And my older sister, I'm very thankful for this, found an internship online, sent it to me. It was like, hey, you should apply for this. It was a social media position, and that just kind of was like, okay, I could probably do that. Like, it was a very like, okay, I think I can, just like that, showing me that there's a job with skills that I have, or that I think I have, outside of running and catching, that I can, do. And so that was just like, for me, like, the realization, like, all right, there is a place in this, working world for you. So that was kind of like my wake up, and my kind of got me back on my feet. But it was definitely like a nerve-wracking time, and like, I didn't have a plan. And even though you hear all the stats, whatever it is, 99% aren't going to go pro and this and that, like, you still don't really think it's going to be you until it's you.
Yeah.
You're like, oh man, they really weren't lying about those people not going pro.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you said, whenever that end occurs, right? It's a tough pill to swallow. And the other thing is, like, where's the economy when that time happens? Like, I graduated college in 2009, probably like one of the worst times to graduate, right? And same thing. I had this idea I was going to be a sports agent, and had done business school to prepare myself for the business side of things, and Next thing I know, I've got $120,000 of student loan debt because I'm one of those guys from USF, by the way, not from like Harvard. And, you know, life hits you really quick. At that time, and you have no control over the environment you go out into. And I think for a lot of kids who put so much into one thing, whether it's football or a certain career path or a certain education path like I was doing, and it doesn't work out or it ends before you thought it would, it can be really, really difficult. And if you don't have people to help you, like you had your sister, I had some fraternity brothers, thankfully, that kind of helped me get jobs, and kind of then I met my now wife, and she kind of helped me on the career path that I'm on now. But if you don't have those people, it can be really, really difficult. Just like the recruiting process and having, whether it's your dad involved or another person to help you along the way. I think the theme of these transitions or stages of life change, the theme is have people to help you and to support you and to give you advice as you're trying to make these decisions.
Absolutely. And I think there's, especially with athletes, there's kind of this idea that you have to be self-made and you got to do it your own. You got to, you know, do whatever. But like, I really would just encourage people to kind of be humble enough to have good counsel, whether that's parents, friends, fraternity brothers, whatever it is, just to not, you're not alone. You don't have to be alone. Life's a lot more fun when you have people on the ride with you. And so whether it's, you know, your wife, your one person, or you have a family, or whatever it is, having that support system is definitely valuable.
Yeah. So your internship, but now you're in real estate. So like, how did you end up in real estate? And I think for a lot of people who listen, and real estate's an interesting topic, but I know a little bit about your story, so I'd love you to tell everybody else. Like, it's kind of one of those traditional real estate stories, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of before I get into it, I definitely would just say like, be open-minded to like where your career can take you, and don't be so like, you know, I first internship was social media, and in my mind I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be the best social media guy, and I'm gonna be doing social media for the rest of my life. Like, no, I did it for like 6 months, and I liked it, but just, you know, you grow and evolve, and life has different plans, and I was open to those plans, but. I started that internship, and it was with the Buccaneers. I was doing their social media, and I was just trying to figure out what I wanted out of life. I was kind of like, what's the word I would say? Like, I had this weird kind of love-hate relationship with football, where I was still loved football, but I was like kind of bitter because I felt like football broke up with me, and I wasn't ready to break up with football. I did the internship because I like kind of wanted to be in sports, but I wasn't quite ready to be like a coach or anything like that. And so it was kind of sports adjacent. But during that process, I was really just like trying to figure out, you know, like I had to kind of recalibrate, you know, who I was, what I wanted out of life, what I thought was possible. You know, if you grow up thinking you really believe you're going to be an NFL player, then you believe a certain life is going to be possible, and certain things are going to come with that. And then when you're working a 9-to-5 internship making minimum wage, then all of a sudden you think, oh, you limit to like what you think is possible, what you think is going to happen. Yeah. And then I had to kind of realize that like my future was somewhere in between that, where I wasn't going to be minimum wage worker for the rest of my life. And yeah, I'm not going to be a multi-millionaire NFL player either, but like there's a reality for me somewhere in between that. And so I had to kind of figure all that out. But all that being said, I ended my internship, and I went into that internship with like kind of an athlete mindset, like I'm just going to outwork everybody, you know, coming in on time or coming in early, leaving late, staying late, doing all that stuff. And then I'm going to have a job afterwards. I'm going to rise the ladder. And and then at the end of the internship, they were kind of just like, yeah, that's it, man. Thanks for your time. We really appreciate you. And so that was discouraging. But that kind of led me to getting into real estate, because at that point, I was like, man, I don't ever want to work for anybody ever again. I was so just angry, and just not at the Bucs, but just at the way the setup was, you know. And my mentor encouraged me to get my real estate license, simply because he had a couple projects he was working on, and like thought I might be able to help him out, and maybe I could get a quick payday here and there. And so I got my license, and in my mind, I was going to be like a house flipper, and I was just going to invest in properties, and it was going to be a solo job, and I was going to have no boss, no team, no nothing. It's just going to be me. And thankfully, that's not the way that like things went. One interesting thing, when I was first getting my real estate license, I went up to, it's like a couple week class. I was just going to start it. And Chip Kelly was the head coach of the Eagles at the time. This is like August of whatever year that was, 2016 maybe. And Chip had invited my dad to speak to the team, just for give him a speech during training camp. And he invited me to come up that day as well. And it was cool because a couple of my friends were on the staff. A couple of my friends played on the Eagles. So it was like, oh, cool, I can see some of my boys, whatever. And then when I got there, he was like, hey, do you want to stay a couple extra days? So I ended up staying in Philly for 3 days. I'm sitting in on meetings. I'm just hanging out with the staff. And I'm almost like, this is weird. What's going on here? And then at the end of the couple of days, he was like, hey, man, great seeing you, whatever. And I was like, okay, cool. Went back, started my real estate classes. A few days later, James Harris, who was one of I'm not sure his official role, but he's just one of Chip's guys, offered me a entry level job, and I had to think about it, and I turned it down. And I think probably 99.9% of people, if they would have got offered a job in the NFL, would have jumped out in a heartbeat. But just based on all of my life experiences at that point, I was like, you know what, I want something that's going to be maybe a little bit more permanent and not so transient. I was looking for something, some consistency, and I was still a little bitter about football, and just all the different things led me to say, you know what, I'm going to see this out. I just started the classes, kind of going back to what Coach Wiener about commitments. I made that commitment to start the classes, and so I wanted to see that through. And this is weird to say this, but I was like, if I want to get into coaching, I could probably get a similar entry level job maybe the next season. Yeah. Not to say that I was just blowing it off, but I just felt just realistically, if I wanted to be a quality control guy, that job's probably there for me the next year. Yep. And so I respectfully turned it down and got into real estate and haven't looked back.
Man, that is crazy. I mean, because you're right. I think probably 99.9% would have said yes to that job. But yeah, I mean, you've seen it your whole life. So you knew what that would take and what that could look like. And I think what I hear for kind of more, I guess, the everyday non-players, you were looking for something you could build a career in, as in you could do for the rest of your life, have, as you said, agency over how successful you are, not being dependent on, obviously, hey, is Chip going to be around with the Eagles for the long term, which we all know now after the fact he wasn't. And so you're kind of riding that wave of where is the person I'm working for going to go next, because that change is inevitable to happen. So I think it's crazy in one sense, but it's really smart in another sense, because you prioritized the long-term view of your life over the short-term cool factor, right? Or, trying to continue this football dream that, in the end you could probably always go back to, but is it going to provide you the long-term life that you want?
Exactly. I think that was the key to it, was just the long-term life. I didn't have everything mapped out at age 24, but I just felt like a football coach lifestyle wasn't the one I was looking for, especially at that time, and how it worked out. The Eagles, I think Chip ended up getting fired that season at the end of that year, and then went to San Francisco for 1 year and got fired there. Yeah. And so that would have been, if I would have been lucky enough to go to San Francisco, I would have had to find another job the next year. One of my friends went to UCF with Coach Frost after that. So it could have, it could have been that, it could have been, who knows, right? And I was just looking for some consistency, and I had a vision. I'm still single, don't have family or anything like that, but I had a vision of hopefully one day having a family and living in a house for a long time and not moving 10 different times and not having my future kids change schools and do all this stuff. And so I just kind of made that decision kind of with the long-term perspective, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, which I think is great. And I think is something everybody should think about, even as you're playing, right? There are so many opportunities, whether you're in college or certainly as a pro, you can still make decisions while you're playing that set you up for the long term, because at some point the door is going to shut. It just is. It's inevitable.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing I got to give credit to like younger players. I think they are better at like compartmentalizing things and making those decisions. Like you said, like I'm playing right now, but I'm going to make a decision for next year or for 5 years from now. Versus, when I was younger, I was very stuck in the present, which can be good at certain times, but maybe not good in other situations.
Yeah.
And maybe I wasn't able to, be present in college, but make decisions for after college, or be present in high school, but make decisions for college, or whatever the case may be. So I think younger kids, because of NIL, because of, kind of the free agency aspect of college, if you will, they're able to kind of compartmentalize things, make those business decisions. And I think that hopefully that'll just kind of increase over time.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, they're sort of forced to, right? Or else they're going to get lost in the shuffle. Because there's just so many opportunities out there that they can, take advantage of. So I think it's a good perspective. So you turn it down, you go get your license. You think you're going to flip houses. How'd that go?
Yeah, didn't flip any houses. It was the market was tough for that at the time. I think that was like 2016 or so. And then it was just, for me, like I had investors I was working with, but I just couldn't find a good property. And so I didn't want to make like a bad purchase on my first one and blow all the money. So it just didn't really materialize. But eventually what that led to me was me thinking more, like I still want to work in real estate, and kind of led me to kind of pivot a little bit. And I was like, man, I really think I need to have some kind of niche. So then I was like, what can that niche be? And, for better or worse, all I knew was football and sports. And so I was like, all right, maybe I could do something with athletes. So that's all I could think of was like something with the athletes. And I was kind of like, workshopping some ideas and some concepts. And I met my current business partner, who at the time was more so just a mentor. And he had kind of an athlete-driven business already going, and, met me and was willing to take me on under his wing. And then shortly after that, we met our other partner, Ben Moss, who is the director of Compass's sports entertainment division. So it went from me kind of just like manifesting something with athletes and real estate to being an agent at Compass's sports entertainment division within like a couple of months. It was very crazy how it all played out. Just kind of like an only guy kind of thing. But I went from a wannabe house flipper to kind of a realtor who specializes in working with professional athletes and entertainers kind of over like a year or so. And then, it wasn't like I just all of a sudden had a big Rolodex of clients. Yeah. It took a little while. Once I had the title and the ambition to actually go make that a reality.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point, right? Like a lot of people might say, well, oh gosh, your name, your dad, where you played, all that stuff. But no, the reality is it was still a grind for you. Like you still had to go out and do things to build that Rolodex. Like talk a little bit about what that experience was like.
Yeah. So basically, and like, yeah, I'll be like, my name certainly maybe got me into some doors, maybe it was an icebreaker, but I had to still go like plant those seeds. And for me, I was fortunate. I had a pretty good deal when I first got into real estate, where I had a little bit of money. And so, but I took all the commission from that and basically reinvest that into my business, in the sense of that for the next 2 years, all I did was coffees, lunches, breakfasts, happy hour, whatever, you name it. And if that meant getting on a plane and flying somewhere to see somebody face to face, like whatever it was, all I was doing was just planting seeds. So going to the NFL Combine, going to the NBA All-Star, Senior Bowl, you name it, just whatever event, individual players, charity events in Tampa, going to meet with sports agents, or even just, non-athlete prospects within Tampa, just friends and family and sphere and people in my sphere of influence. But basically just for 2 years, and I did not see a lot of traction right away. I wasn't getting, instant gratification. I wasn't, on Instagram with my fancy car, my big houses, and, flexing on everybody. It was kind of like my stay down to, kind of until you come up period. And honestly, like kind of liking that back to being an athlete though, when it's like, when you're a freshman on the team, unless you're like, really like you're Adrian Peterson, like you're not going to start and be an all-star right away. You're going to have to put your reps in, and maybe by your junior, senior year, you'll make it through, and you might have to redshirt a year. You may see other people have success ahead of you, whatever it may be. But like just having that process of like, all right, every day, win the day. What am I going to do today to get better? How am I going to just move the ball a little bit further every day? And so, yeah, for 2 years, I just was kind of on my little, like, just my little grind, where I just was on my our buddy Dearness Johnson kind of calls it the slow grind. So I'll just use that from him, where you're just out there putting on the grind and nobody sees it. It's not fun. It's not sexy, but eventually, it comes to fruition.
Yeah. And I think it's great that you pointed back to that's what every football player has to do, but certainly a 2-star recruit, that's what you had to do. And yeah, Dearness, he's grinded out in other football leagues, grinded out on practice squads, and just doing whatever he can until he ends up finally getting onto the field and ends up performing, right? So the same thing, with whatever you do professionally.
Exactly. So that was basically just kind of my process. And then I was fortunate, my kind of breakthrough, an Oregon player, I guess I'll say his name. It's been a few years now. TJ Ward was signed by the Bucks. And so I helped TJ find an apartment in Tampa. Didn't make any money on the deal, but I just went above and beyond to help him get a good place for 6 months while he played for the Bucks for 1 year. And he introduced me to some different contacts, some players, some people on the management side, agents and advisors, things like that. And that was kind of my breakthrough. But my thing was every day I didn't know what day was going to be the day that was going to be my breakthrough. And so I went to every meeting and every showing and every opportunity is this could be the client that helps me break through. And eventually it happened to be TJ based on, our previous friendship and then me coming through when it mattered. But I didn't know who was going to be that person that was going to kind of open the door for me. And so I just went through every day, treating every day today could be the day that I get my big break.
Yeah. But yeah, it's some of the best advice I've received is, just focus on creating value for the people that are directly in front of you. Even if that doesn't return value to you today, you just keep doing that over and over and over again. And eventually it'll come back typically in a much bigger way than if you focus on what is this situation going to bring me. And especially you're in real estate, right? It's very that is the job. If I sell this house, here's how much I make, right? And I think a lot of people could get wrapped up in that, and even former athlete could get wrapped up in you're not performing on the field, my stats aren't there, my play time isn't there, all those things that could bring you down. Just like in your field of real estate, if you're not selling houses, you're not making commissions, that could really bring you down. But if you just focus on creating value, eventually it'll turn around in a big way, which I think based on where your career is today, that really has happened for you, right?
Yeah, and thankfully my partner and mentor, John Fincher, really poured that into me from the get-go. And when I was first getting into it, he was always encouraging me, how do you provide value? And that's how I led a lot of my conversations with my early clients and prospects was just hey, I don't have a handout. I don't want nothing from you, but how can I help you? Can I give you a analysis on what your home is worth? Can I run some numbers for you? Can I, whatever, what can I do for you? Can I tell you about the market? Can I tell you about what the current rates are? Whatever it is, what can I do for you? I'm going to help you with a short-term rental and not even get paid. Boom, I got it. I'm there. Just what can I do for you? And eventually, just people will help people that help them. That's human nature. And then whether they do or don't, it comes back around. That's how life works. So I'm a big believer in that, and I'm thankful that I had some mentors that kind of encouraged me to do that from the get-go.
Yeah, and you haven't brought it up, but I think that was also your dad's philosophy, right? Think about all the guys that he has set off into coaching careers as well. So I'm sure some part of that was probably inside of you from just seeing what he did. But it goes back to regardless of the fact that it was your dad and he's high profile. It's you said John provided that to you as well. Finding people that you can surround yourself with who are looking to serve other people is going to make you a better servicer of other people. And ultimately, if you want a career in probably any field that certainly has a lucrative upside, that's what it's all about is how many people can you impact their lives and whatever that means for you. It's real estate. For me, it's general financial advice and tax savings and things like that. But it's the more people you can serve, the more it'll come back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to sum it up, man, just the concept of servant leadership. Mm-hmm. It's a biblical principle, but I think it applies to business and to life. And it's just about kind of leading by example. I saw a really cool clip of Gerald McCoy on Hard Knocks a few years ago, where he's carrying the rookies' pads and helmets in after practice, and they're like, "What are you doing? You're Gerald McCoy." But it's nah, man, I'm going to serve first. That way you guys know, like, I got your back. I have your best interest at heart. And once you kind of establish that, then amazing things are possible, going forward. So, yeah, like you said, that concept of being a servant first in any industry, that's the key.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, this has been awesome. I've loved hearing the journey. I knew some of it. I didn't know all of it. But I always want to leave, open at the end. Is there anything else any other advice or things that you think would be valuable for others to hear from your journey in football and life?
Oh, man. Good question. You've done an amazing job of kind of drawing some things out of me. I hadn't talked about some of those things ever, if not in a very long time. So I don't know that I have anything additionally, but this has been an amazing conversation. Really kind of therapeutic for me in a way, kind of looking back on my life, and also just feels good to be able to kind of share my experiences and hopefully, motivate and inspire some people who are listening and watching this.
Yeah. That's the hope, right? Is that your story can help other, kids that are currently, whether it's football or any other student athlete, life after your sport will come. And, but everything you're doing today, as much as it's going to help you with whatever sport you're playing, it's going to help you in whatever you do for the rest of your life. And regardless of how your career goes, there's so many lessons you can take from it that'll make you a better, as you said, servant leader, a better, if you're married, a husband, a dad. I know it's made me a better dad with my new 10-week-old son. So there's so many lessons that being an athlete can teach you that make you better throughout life, regardless of how successful you end up being and whenever that door shuts for you. And I think that's told through your story. So thanks for sharing it.
Awesome, man. Thank you. I'll end with this. A lot of people do ask me about real estate, and two kind of general pieces of advice that I give to everybody would be to do right by others and keep the big picture in mind. And if you just kind of have those two things kind of be your kind of like your guiding principles in whatever you're doing, sports, business, etc., should be all right.
Yeah, completely agree. That's a good point to end on. So thanks again, Eric, for spending the time and telling us your story. And we'll hopefully tell more stories as we go along, and maybe we'll have you back to do a real estate specific episode where we can drop a little bit more knowledge about the market and some of your thoughts. So thanks again, man.
Awesome. That sounds great. Thanks for having me, Dustin.